Welcome to KAD Chat, powered by Kusam. I'm your host, John Konings. Today we have a special guest. She's an athlete, writer, volunteer, and social media superstar, Sarah Christine Lynch. Now here's a little backstory. Sarah recently came to South Korea and documented her entire trip via social media. She had so many followers, she decided to try to start a fundraiser to help the orphanage that had adopted her out. Now here's Sarah.
The fundraiser was a bit of an interesting development. I love buying and preparing gifts for loved ones, so I designed the fundraiser off the notion that I could make a lot of adults, and most importantly a lot of children, happy by providing them with lots of toys and necessities. My life these days is full of friends, followers, supporters, and loved ones, and I presented the idea to them via social media. Facebook, Twitter, email, you name it, I posted it there. So, by the end of the first month of creating the GoFundMe page, we raised over $1,000. I was actually kind of shocked because I didn't think that people would be so generous towards such a small idea. The fundraiser ran from January 1st, 2014 to April 15th, 2014, and within that time we raised over $5,700. So when I went to Korea, I presented the amount to the head of the sponsorship department at the Eastern Social Welfare Society, and they told me that a huge necessity for the foster mothers and the agency alike are diapers, which is pretty obvious because of how many children they have and how many children go into foster care. I thought that was an awesome idea to give them something that they can really genuinely use. So they ordered the diapers my first week of being there, and by the fourth week the delivery truck had arrived. And I paid for the diapers and the truck full of boxes of diapers with the funds that were donated from my friends and followers. It was such an amazing experience and so reassuring to know how important that gift was. Actually, while they were unpacking the truck, a social worker had walked up to me and confided in me, then told me that a lot of the foster mothers still use cloth diapers due to insufficient funds to buy disposable. And so in saying that, she assured me that these diapers would really be used, and they're going to help a lot of people.
Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about your family now?
I currently live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I was born in Seongnam, South Korea. And right now I'm still living at home, and my family and I have lived in Pittsburgh since I was adopted. So I live about 20 minutes north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My parents adopted 2 children from South Korea, myself along with my brother Alex, who is currently 18 years old and attending his first year in college. So we're about 6 years apart.
That's great. How do you currently identify?
I classify myself as a Korean adoptee. If anyone asks what nationality I am, I do only say Korean though. I wasn't always forthcoming with that question. I used to find being asked my nationality sort of intrusive and somewhat unnecessary, because I always thought if I wasn't Asian, I wouldn't be asked that. But as I've grown and as I've matured and became comfortable in my skin, I've grown to actually love that question. I love answering it because I have a story to tell, and it's an interesting story. And whenever I start my story and get to the part where I met with my birth mother and I flew to Korea, people are really fascinated and they learn. And I think that that's the most important thing, that whether or not it makes me feel uncomfortable or whether it doesn't make me feel good to continue this story or say it a billion times, people learn from it, and that's the most important thing.
Now it's time for a listener question. One listener asked if she thought it'd be wise to temporarily live in Korea with her adopted Korean daughter.
To be totally honest, I've never come across this question. I think it's a really fascinating concept of an adoptive family living in Korea with their child. I'm not quite sure how to answer it because there are definitely pros and cons that can weigh in on this option for an adopted child. If I was if a family's willing to make that sacrifice for their child, I think that's great. I think that's genuinely awesome. My mother deciding to join me for my first trip back to Korea was such an amazing and personal experience. We got to look at my adoption file together. We tried new foods together. We literally learned the entire city of Seoul together. It was a really, really cool experience to have my mother there the first time going back. Some adoptees don't want that. Some adoptees think that it's their trip and their own personal journey, and I respect that 100%. But I liked having that comfort of having my mother there, to have somebody to learn with me and to grow with me and to understand it with me. So it was really cool. And one of the coolest things was I've never ridden the subway before. I went to Korea, so we got to learn the subway together. And obviously a lot of the signs are in Korean, and they're also in English, but we got to learn how to get to one place to another together, and it was so cool. I don't even know how to describe how cool it was, because not too many people get to experience that, but I wouldn't change my first trip for anything. But also having my mother visit a culture so vastly different than America kind of opened her own eyes to the true essence of Asia, and to block out and to defeat stereotypes of Asians. The one thing that she was really fascinated by was how tall Asian men are. Because the stereotype in America is that Asian men are fairly short. And she was just shocked by how many 5'10", 5'11", 6 feet tall guys there were. And it was really, really cool to see somebody who has grown up with these stereotypes and grown up with this image of what Korea is and what Korea stands for, and to have her realize what it truly is. But also by being able to experience it and experience Korea on her own, she's able to educate other adoptive parents, other people in general, and also tell a really great story to those curious about our trip. I don't know if I can say moving there is 100% necessary, as long as the adoptive parent is open-minded and willing to explore their children's roots. I don't think, looking at my life, that I would want my parents to forfeit their lives in America to keep me in Korea. I genuinely think that I would still have the same adoption issues that I have now.
The next question is about confidence. How do you build confidence in a Korean adopted child? And what was your experience with your own confidence growing up?
Up until my freshman year of college, I didn't own an ounce of confidence. I wore a lot of black, covered my face with my hair, kept to myself because I didn't think anyone would like me. It was a really difficult thing for me to feel love, or to feel like I was worth receiving love. These days I can see a correlation between my abandonment issues and not feeling worth people's time or love. I genuinely believe that there's an internal mindset that says, my mother didn't want me, therefore I'm not worth anyone's approval. And I lived that mentality for a really long time, until, frankly, I got sick and tired of feeling worthless. It's really exhausting to feel bad all the time, and to feel upset all the time, and to be angry all the time. Some days I just didn't even want to get out of bed, because I just didn't feel like dealing with the world around me, because there was nothing good about it. So thinking back to myself in my teenage years, I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety, which masked underlying adoption issues. I can for sure say that the online Korean adoptee community, as well as other followers and supporters, honestly assisted in changing my life around. Their constant encouraging words and upbeat posts and reassurance that I'm a good person helped me recognize that I can feel better. I just had to be ready for it.
Sarah is currently working on a memoir. It dives deep into how her adoption has played a role in the relationships in her life.
I'm a bit torn on whether I made the right choices as a young adult. I sacrificed my teenage and college years to sort out my adoption issues, and in result missed out on a lot of things normal 20-year-olds experience. However, on the flip side of that, I feel more empowered by the self-realization that I've accomplished in those 5 years of struggle. I don't think many people my age understand their actions, feelings, along with their trials and tribulations, down to the very core, like I do. And like every positive emotion that I feel was created from genuine pain from the past. When I was growing up in my teenage years and my young adult years, I didn't possess any of the technical words for what my insides were screaming at me. So the book I'm currently working on is sort of a portrayal of those feelings that did not have names. Yes, I was depressed, and yes, I was anxious, but it was much more specific than that. Certain people in my life became fixations, and their presence and or lack of presence caused my internal turmoil. And because of this one detail, I knew it was far more complex than what doctors were addressing it as. I knew that it wasn't just depression, and I knew it wasn't just anxiety, but I honestly wasn't ready to explain the fixations on people because it sounds a little scary and it sounds a little crazy, and for me I was like terrified that I would get arrested or something ridiculous, because when your feelings are so stuck on one person and everything they do either upsets you or makes you extremely happy and completely terrified when they're around you, but yet you're so lonely when they're not. It is so overwhelming. And I would go to these therapists and these psychiatrists, and I would give them all the details except the detail about that person and about how they make me feel. And I left out the biggest part of the entire issue. I refused to tell them because I was so embarrassed by it. And I didn't know if it was a sexuality issue or if it was something more than that. Because it wasn't sexual. I wasn't fixating on them sexually. I was fixating on them in like a God way. All my attachments, and I do call them attachments, I put them on a pedestal. Everything they did was perfect. Everything they did was right. Everything about them was so amazing that I wouldn't let myself touch them because I felt dirty around them. I wouldn't let myself be myself around them in fear that they would reject me. And that's where I needed to figure it out. And that's why I wouldn't tell people about it, because I was scared that they would take it sexually, and it wasn't that. I do have one story. In college, I had an attachment, and it was so strong, and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I tried to explain it to her, which was so awkward, and I regret doing it now. But I tried to explain to her that whatever she says, I will do for her, because my devotion was that strong. And I use the analogy that if she would ask me to jump off a bridge, I would do it in a second. Thinking back on it now, it wasn't the greatest idea to use that, but I was trying to voice the extent of my feelings towards her and how important she was to me. And to somebody that doesn't understand what's going on, that's kind of scary to hear, right? So I'm writing this book to kind of explain my actions, because I want to be clear about it. And I still think that my attachments think weird things about me, and they know exactly all my actions and all my thoughts and everything, but they don't understand the core of it. And that's kind of why I'm writing this book, is I want people to understand the core of adoption issues and how painful it can be and how overwhelming and how deterrent towards life it can be. So that's sort of where the basis of a lot of the chapters are at, is explaining feelings that didn't have names. I didn't have any technical names or diagnoses that I could say, because I didn't understand it myself, but I could explain to you how I felt. So, just like many teenagers and young adults, they don't know how to name what they're feeling, but they can just exactly describe to you how it made them feel. And that was my entire existence for who knows how long, 5, 6, 7 years. So to be honest, you really won't find the word adoption or adoptee in a lot of the chapters, because I didn't know what I was feeling was adoption related until I was about 22 years old. Before that, the anger, sadness, etc. were just feelings that controlled me and literally overwhelmed me. Actually, to be honest, this factor in the progress of my books makes me pretty happy, because this book is not just an adoption story. It's a written account of the difficulties of becoming a young adult. All the feelings a teenager goes through and must deal with through the day, and how it truly has the ability to interfere with life. Also, I think it's really important that my intention with this book is to tell people that what they're feeling is okay. Showing them that their inner voice, whatever it may be saying, is not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something you have to hide. It took me a really long time, about 10 years, to figure out that my story and my former feelings could help another individual fight their own personal demons. That's why I incorporated my journal entries into the chapters. I always worried that, God forbid, I die too soon, and that my journals could be read by someone else. Even to this day, I still feel kind of ashamed by the stories that my journal depicts, because they are very personal, and they can be perceived as very creepy, because with my adoption issues and the void that was creating inside my chest, the only thing that filled it were my attachments and the people that I chose to put there temporarily. So a lot of my journals just depict my interactions with that person and how that person made me feel. I have the most detailed stories in my journal about days that I've spent with these people. And if they would read them, they would be really creeped out. And if I had somebody write stories like that about me, I would be really creeped out too. Because of my journals, I remember details about these people that they probably don't remember themselves. But along with being very embarrassing, my journals are very important to my story and to my heart, because they literally describe the struggle that I had to personally overcome. And it kind of, you can see in it my more realization and the process of working through my adoption. And you can see in my journals the ignorance that I had towards what was going on, to slowly building some knowledge and building some understanding of myself, to the point that at the end you can see that I understand what's going on, and now I have the control to stop it, and I have the control to take care of it, and to see the signs, and to see the warnings, and to see the symptoms happening, and put a stop to it before it gets out of control. And that's why I put my journals in there, because this book, as well as my journals, are a story of coming to myself and working through everything that I've gone through, and how important it is for a young person to go through that journey. And that's what my journals and why I put them in there. So I hope that that gets depicted. The book itself is not in, it's not in that, it's not going to be as clear, but I am excited that people can see the angst through writing raw pieces of my journal inside this book. I'm not editing them. They will have swear words. They won't be censored. But that's how I expressed the pain that I was in, by swearing, by talking about self-mutilation, by talking about hating myself, by talking about hating them. It's a very angry journal, but it was anger because I didn't understand what was going on, and that anger and frustration and not being able to have what I wanted, it all swirled together, and that's totally depicted in my journals, and that's why I chose to put them in there, but it's also why I chose to leave them raw. I didn't edit them at all, and I'm excited that people get to see that, and I hope that people can feel that. I want this book to make people uncomfortable, and I want it to make people feel how I felt. So I hope that's depicted through it. So yeah, I mean, putting my journal in there is really, really difficult for me, but at the same time, I understand that it will help the reader find comfort in their own struggles, and understand that one day, when they feel ready, they can have a voice of their own, and that voice will be okay, and that there will be people out there that understand, and there will be people that can relate and can use your words to their benefit. And that's really why I'm writing this book.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your personal story with us. Do you have any advice for other Korean adoptees or the parents of Korean adoptees?
My advice to younger adoptees is to love who you are, no matter who that is. Never allow your inner voice to diminish your value, because at the end of the day, the only person who truly needs to love you is yourself. The minute you love yourself, honestly, the sky will be bluer, and the sun will shine brighter, and people will gravitate towards you and your energy. When I began to love myself and the girl inside of me, everything else fell into place. Life became so much easier as soon as I quit fighting myself. Because that inner battle essentially makes everything else seem easier. When you quit fighting who you are and what you are and start to embrace and love it, you get this opportunity to see that some of the battles that you're fighting on the outside are dumb, and that you don't need to be fighting those battles. So, for me, I would push away love only to want it more. So I would push away the only love and support given to me, which made me so weak. I was so emotionally weak, and even physically weak. And my brain was exhausted, and my heart was exhausted, and my eyes couldn't cry anymore, because I wanted something and I wasn't accepting it. Which is such a weird sensation, to only crave love and support, yet push it away when it's given to you. Your heart desires it, yet your mind says you don't deserve it. And that inner battle can defeat the strongest of people. My advice for adoptive parents is to use your listening ears and to really work hard on recognizing cries for help from their adoptive child. I don't blame my parents for anything, but I do feel like I battled my inner demons alone, and that isn't a good feeling at all. Being so open with my adoption and my struggles took a really long time, and a lot of days unable to leave bed. A lot of tears from pain I didn't understand, and a lot of mistakes. So I think it's really important for adoptive parents to put in that extra effort for their child. Also, I think it's really important to give lots of reassurance to adoptive children. Too much is never enough for a child dealing with self-worth issues. So give that extra effort to tell them how great they are, how amazing they are, and how much you love them. Because whether or not they admit it to you, they need that, and that will help heal that wound a little bit. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I am always here for you. My Facebook is Sarah Christine Lynch. My Gmail, I can give you that I have Twitter, I have Skype, I have basically every social media that you could think of. And I am very open to receiving messages and emails, and I promise you that I will listen, and I promise you that I will do my best to give a calculated and professional and positive answer, but a positive answer with honesty about what your children or you can look forward to as they grow. So, thank you, and have a good day.
I want to give a special thanks to Sarah for participating. If you'd like to know more about our book, you can follow the link to our Facebook page in the description section. If you would like to help support this program, you can go to www.cusam.co.kr/benefactions. Thank you, and until next time.